Attention! You're about to discover one of the most surprising stories of World War II, a profound account based on rare documents and forgotten testimonies. Before we begin, tell us in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. And if you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel. Now turn up the volume and dive with us into this investigation. In the early morning hours of November 23rd, 1944, a German reconnaissance officer sent an urgent dispatch to divisional headquarters. The message, later recovered from military archives, contained an observation that would fundamentally alter the perception of what had occurred the previous night. Enemy armor displaying unusual competence and coordination. Crews appear to be Negro soldiers. Request immediate verification. What followed this transmission was a series of events that would remain classified until 1968, when a military historian accidentally discovered documents that contradicted the official narrative of that November engagement in eastern France. The discovery revealed not only tactical brilliance, but also the deliberate obscuring of one of the most remarkable tank actions of the European theater. The 761st Tank Battalion, an all-black unit within the segregated American military, had arrived in France just weeks earlier after nearly 2 years of intensive training at Camp Claiborne, Louisiana. Despite their exemplary performance records, the unit faced persistent skepticism from the military establishment. Lieutenant Colonel James Thomas Richardson, a West Point graduate who had been assigned to command the unit, wrote in his personal journal on October 7, 1944, "These men have trained harder and longer than any tank battalion I've encountered. Yet the question remains whether they will be allowed to prove themselves when it matters." This sentiment was echoed by Master Sergeant Horace Wilson, who noted in a letter home, "We've been ready for combat since 1942. The only battle we keep fighting is the one against those who believe we aren't capable." The battalion consisted of 6 companies, each with approximately 18 Sherman tanks. Company A was led by Captain William Peterson, a 32-year-old former schoolteacher from Philadelphia. Company B was under the command of First Lieutenant Elijah Montgomery, 28, who had worked as a mechanic in Detroit before the war. Company C was commanded by Captain Robert Johnson, 30, from New York City. Companies D, E, and F were service and headquarters companies that provided maintenance, supply, and command support. Together, they formed what would later be nicknamed Patton's Panthers, though the famous general initially expressed significant reservations about their deployment. Documents declassified in 1966 revealed that General George Patton had written to 3rd Army Headquarters on November 1, 1944. "I have my doubts about the combat effectiveness of Negro troops in tank warfare. I have no personal prejudice against them, because that would be merely a form of racial prejudice. But I do not believe they have the necessary reflexes to operate armored vehicles in combat conditions." This assessment would be dramatically disproven within weeks, though the general would later claim to have always had confidence in the unit. The men themselves were keenly aware of the skepticism they faced. Private First Class James Williams from Georgia wrote in his field diary on November 20, 1944, "We know what they're saying back at headquarters, that we won't hold up under fire, that we'll break and run. Some of the white officers don't even try to hide what they think, but the captain says we just need one chance, one night to show what we can do." That chance would come sooner than any of them expected. On November 22, 1944, intelligence reports indicated that elements of the 12th SS Panzer Division were moving into position near the town of Goebling, preparing for a counterattack against the American advance. What the German command did not anticipate was that the 761st had been specifically positioned to intercept this movement, despite the reservations of several senior officers. Major General John Wood had made this decision against significant pressure, noting in a memorandum dated November 21st, If we continue to hold these men in reserve based on unfounded concerns, we waste valuable combat resources. They will be deployed as planned. According to the operation order issued at 1600 hours on November 22nd, Companies A and B of the 761st were to advance under cover of darkness to establish blocking positions along the likely axis of German movement. Company C would be held in reserve, ready to exploit any breakthrough opportunities. Captain Peterson briefed his men as dusk approached. "This is what we've trained for. Tonight, we're not just fighting the enemy in front of us, we're fighting for every black soldier who's been told they're not good enough." Technical Sergeant Emmanuel Lewis recalled in a 1960 interview, "You could have heard a pin drop during that briefing. We all knew what was at stake. This wasn't just about taking ground. This was about proving something." The operation began at 2100 hours. Under complete radio silence, 36 Sherman tanks moved into position through the cold, mist-shrouded landscape of eastern France. The weather conditions, initially considered problematic, ultimately worked to their advantage. Lieutenant Montgomery's driver, Corporal Walter Jenkins, later recounted, "The visibility was terrible, couldn't see more than 20 yards ahead. But we'd trained for this in Louisiana. Night operations in bad weather. What was a hindrance to the Germans was home territory for us." At approximately 23:30 hours, forward scouts from the 761st reported enemy armored vehicles moving into the valley below their positions. What happened next would become the subject of military study for decades to come, though initially the records would show a very different account of the night's events. Are you keeping up so far? Help us bring this story to more people. Like the video, comment if you already knew about this case, and subscribe to the channel. Now we return to the point where everything changed. The first contact between the 761st and the German panzer units occurred at approximately 00:15 hours on November 23rd. Rather than engaging directly from their advantageous elevated positions, Captain Peterson implemented a tactic that had been extensively rehearsed but rarely employed in combat. He ordered a coordinated movement that would bring his tanks down behind the German formation while Lieutenant Montgomery's company remained in position, effectively creating a closing vice. This maneuver, executed in near-total darkness, required extraordinary coordination and discipline. Private First Class David Monroe, a gunner in Peterson's company, described the approach in a letter written in December 1944. "We moved like ghosts, engines throttled back, using the terrain to mask our sounds. The Germans had no idea we were there until we were right on top of them. When the captain gave the order to open fire, it was like the whole world exploded at once. The effect was devastating. The German tank commanders, caught completely by surprise and surrounded on two sides, found themselves in a chaotic situation with no clear escape route. Documents retrieved from the captured German command vehicle included fragmentary reports sent to their headquarters under heavy attack from multiple directions, American tanks appearing from nowhere. Request immediate reinforcement. The last transmission, sent at 01:45 hours, simply stated, "Position untenable, withdrawing remaining vehicles." By dawn, the battlefield told the story. 17 German tanks and armored vehicles had been destroyed or abandoned. The 761st had lost only 3 tanks, with 14 casualties, including 4 fatalities. The tactical brilliance of the operation was immediately apparent to those present. Colonel William McBride, who arrived at the scene at 0600 hours, sent an initial report to 3rd Army Headquarters. 761st Tank Battalion has executed an extraordinary night action against superior enemy armor. Performance demonstrates exceptional training and leadership. This report, however, would be the last unqualified praise the unit would receive for this action for over 2 decades. By mid-morning on November 23rd, staff officers from divisional headquarters had arrived to assess the situation. What followed was documented in a memorandum written by Captain Peterson and submitted to his superiors, though this document would not be discovered until 1967. Upon review of the battlefield, Colonel James Harrison inquired as to which units had been involved in the engagement. When informed that it was exclusively the 761st, his demeanor changed noticeably. He instructed his aide to collect all after-action reports and indicated that divisional headquarters would issue the official account of the engagement. The explanation provided to the men of the 761st came the following day. Lieutenant Colonel Richardson called his company commanders together and informed them that their action would be recorded as supporting fire for the primary engagement conducted by elements of the 2nd Armored Division. When Captain Johnson protested, Richardson allegedly responded, "This comes from above. The decision has been made." The official history of the engagement, published in Army Dispatches on November 25th, made no mention of the 761st's role except as a footnote indicating support provided by attached tank units. Technical Sergeant Lewis expressed the unit's collective disappointment in a letter to his brother dated November 27th. "We did something that no one thought we could do. We outfought and outthought some of the best German tank units, and now they're telling us it never happened, at least not the way we know it happened." This sentiment was echoed throughout the battalion, creating a sense of bitter resignation that would follow many of the men long after the war had ended. The silence surrounding the engagement was not limited to official records. The men themselves were instructed not to discuss the details of the operation, even among other American units. Private Williams noted in his diary in early December, "We're being told to keep quiet about what happened at Gebling. The white officers say it's for operational security, but we all know the real reason. Nobody wants to admit that a Negro battalion outfought the Germans on their own." This enforced silence would extend far beyond the immediate aftermath of the battle. What makes this case particularly significant was the reaction from the German side. Intelligence officers interrogating prisoners from the 12th SS Panzer Division noted with surprise their accounts of the engagement. One report, dated November 29, 1944, stated, "Multiple prisoners expressed disbelief at having been defeated by Negro tank crews. Initial reaction is denial, followed by reluctant admiration for the tactical execution of the attack." This intelligence assessment was marked for limited distribution and was not incorporated into the broader understanding of the engagement. As the war in Europe progressed, the 761st continued to serve with distinction, participating in major operations including the Battle of the Bulge and the final push into Germany. Their cumulative record was impressive by any standard: 183 days in combat, 8 major campaigns, and one of the lowest vehicle loss rates of any American tank battalion. Yet the story of their most significant independent action remained obscured, referenced only in personal correspondence and private conversations among those who had been there. The official silence extended into the immediate post-war period. When the unit was deactivated in 1946, the commendation cited their support role in numerous engagements, without specific reference to any independent actions. Captain Peterson, who had been recommended for the Silver Star for his leadership during the Gebling engagement, received only a Bronze Star, with a citation that mentioned support of infantry operations rather than the actual tank battle he had commanded. The true story might have remained buried in classified files and personal memories, if not for an unexpected development more than 2 decades later. In 1967, Dr. Harold Mitchell, a military historian researching a book on armored warfare, was reviewing declassified operational reports from the European theater when he noticed discrepancies in accounts of the November 1944 engagements near Gebling. The casualty reports and vehicle loss assessments didn't align with the narrative descriptions, he would later write. It was as if pieces of the puzzle had been deliberately misaligned. Mitchell's curiosity led him to seek out surviving members of the units involved. His first interview, conducted in Chicago in February 1967, was with former Master Sergeant Wilson, who had returned to civilian life as a postal worker. "When he asked me about Gebling, I thought it might be some kind of trick," Wilson recalled in a subsequent documentary. No one had ever asked about what really happened there. It was like it had been erased from history. Once convinced of Mitchell's genuine interest, Wilson provided his personal recollections and connected the historian with other veterans of the 761st. Over the next 18 months, Mitchell conducted 34 interviews with former members of the battalion, building a comprehensive picture of the engagement that contradicted the official record. He also submitted numerous Freedom of Information Act requests for related military documents, many of which were initially denied. The breakthrough came in October 1968, when a clerical error resulted in Mitchell receiving a complete set of the original after-action reports, including Captain Peterson's suppressed memorandum regarding the reattribution of the victory. Armed with this documentary evidence and the testimonies of those who had participated, Mitchell approached the Department of the Army in early 1969 with his findings. The timing was significant, coming amid broader societal reckonings with racial injustice and increased attention to the contributions of Black Americans in military service. After initial resistance, a review panel was established to examine the historical record of the Gebling engagement. The panel's preliminary report, completed in June 1969, acknowledged significant inaccuracies in the original accounts. Evidence strongly suggests that the role of the 761st Tank Battalion was inappropriately minimized in official records, the report stated. Contemporary documentation, including enemy intelligence assessments and suppressed after-action reports, indicate that the unit conducted a successful independent action that merits historical recognition. This acknowledgement, while significant, did not immediately translate into a public correction of the record. Internal memoranda revealed concern about the precedential implications of revising official military histories based on newly discovered evidence of racial discrimination. One senior official noted, "While the historical record should reflect accuracy, we must consider the broader impact of acknowledging systematic misattribution of combat achievements based on racial considerations." The bureaucratic hesitation might have further delayed recognition if not for the persistent advocacy of Dr. Mitchell and a group of former officers from the 761st who had formed an unofficial veterans association. In October 1969, they submitted a formal petition to the Department of the Army, requesting not only correction of the historical record, but also retroactive recognition for those who had distinguished themselves in the engagement. Their efforts gained unexpected support from an unlikely source. Former Colonel Harrison, who had been involved in the original reattribution of the victory, provided a sworn statement acknowledging his role in the alteration of records. Now in declining health, Harrison expressed regret for his actions. "At the time, I was following what I understood to be the established protocol for handling achievements by Negro units. In retrospect, I recognize that my actions contributed to a significant injustice that should be corrected for the historical record. This testimony, combined with the documentary evidence and veteran statements, finally overcame institutional resistance." In December 1969, the Department of the Army issued a formal revision to the official history of the Gebling engagement, acknowledging the 761st Tank Battalion as the primary combat unit responsible for the victory. The revision noted, previous accounts incorrectly attributed this action to elements of the 2nd Armored Division. Historical evidence conclusively demonstrates that the engagement was conducted primarily by the 761st Tank Battalion, which executed a complex night maneuver resulting in the defeat of numerically superior enemy forces. For the surviving veterans of the 761st, this belated recognition brought mixed emotions. Former Captain Johnson, interviewed shortly after the announcement, reflected, "It's gratifying to finally have the truth acknowledged. But it's also bittersweet. Many of the men who deserved to see this day are no longer with us, and nothing can give back the recognition that was denied at the time when it would have meant so much to all of us." The rectification of the historical record prompted broader examinations of how the contributions of black military units had been systematically minimized throughout American military historiography. Researchers identified numerous other instances where achievements had been either downplayed or reassigned to white units, revealing a pattern that extended well beyond this single incident. For military historians, the revised understanding of the Gebling engagement offered valuable tactical insights that had previously been overlooked. The night maneuver executed by the 761st represented an innovative application of armored doctrine that contradicted conventional thinking about tank warfare in that period. As one military analyst noted in a 1970 assessment, the operation demonstrated that well-trained tank units could effectively conduct complex, coordinated movements under conditions previously considered prohibitive. This lesson, had it been properly recognized and incorporated into tactical doctrine at the time, might have accelerated the evolution of armored warfare concepts. The human dimension of the story, however, remains its most compelling aspect. The men of the 761st carried the burden of their unacknowledged achievement throughout their post-war lives. For many, the experience reinforced the bitter reality that their service would not translate into equal treatment in civilian society. Yet they maintained a quiet pride in what they had accomplished, preserved through their private communications and reunions. Staff Sergeant William Thompson, who served as a tank commander in Company B, expressed this duality in a 1972 interview. "We knew what we had done, even if nobody else did. Every man in that battalion carried the truth inside him. We proved something to ourselves that night, and that's something nobody could take away from us, no matter what the official record said." The delayed recognition came too late for some key figures in the story. Captain Peterson, whose tactical innovation had been central to the success of the operation, died in 1965 without seeing his achievement properly acknowledged. Lieutenant Montgomery, who had led the blocking force that completed the encirclement, suffered severe post-war adjustment difficulties that many of his fellow veterans attributed partly to the frustration of having their accomplishments erased. He died by suicide in 1959. For those who survived to see the correction of the record, the acknowledgement represented a form of validation that extended beyond this specific incident. Former Corporal Jenkins, interviewed in 1970, reflected, "This wasn't just about one night in France. It was about proving that the doubts and prejudices we faced were never justified. We did everything that was asked of us, and more. The fact that it took 25 years to acknowledge that simple truth says more about America than it does about us." The story of the 761st Tank Battalion at Gebling exemplifies both the excellence achieved by black service members despite institutional barriers and the systematic erasure of those achievements from official narratives. The recovery of this history demonstrates the importance of persistent inquiry and the willingness to challenge established accounts that may reflect prejudicial distortions rather than factual reality. In the decades since the revision of the official record, the Gebling engagement has been incorporated into broader historical understandings of both the technical evolution of armored warfare and the social dynamics that shaped how military achievements were recognized and recorded. Military academies now study the tactical innovation demonstrated by the 761st, alongside the institutional failures that initially obscured their contribution. For the families of those who served in the battalion, the belated recognition provided a measure of closure and pride. Descendants of the men involved have preserved letters, photographs, and personal accounts, ensuring that the truth of what occurred on that November night in 1944 continues to be remembered. As the daughter of Sergeant Lewis observed at a commemorative event in 1995, "My father always told us what really happened, even when the history books said something different." Now his grandchildren can read the true story and know that he was part of something remarkable. The revised understanding of the Gwebling engagement also contributed to broader reassessments of the contributions of black military units throughout American history. Researchers have since identified numerous other instances where achievements were minimized or reassigned, revealing patterns of systematic erasure that extended well beyond this single incident. This ongoing process of historical recovery continues to reshape our understanding of military history and the role of racial dynamics in shaping official narratives. Perhaps the most enduring legacy of the 761st's achievement at Gwebling is the demonstration that excellence can emerge despite, rather than because of, the conditions under which it is pursued. The men who executed that brilliant tactical maneuver did so not only against a formidable enemy, but also against the weight of institutional skepticism and societal prejudice. Their success, temporarily obscured but ultimately acknowledged, stands as testimony to capabilities that transcended the artificial limitations imposed by racial discrimination. As we reflect on this recovered history, we are reminded of how many other stories may remain buried in classified files, overlooked in archives, or preserved only in the fading memories of those who lived them. The journey from erasure to acknowledgement in this case was made possible by the persistence of those who recognized that historical truth matters, not merely as an academic exercise, but as a necessary correction to narratives that have shaped our understanding of who contributes and who deserves recognition in our collective memory. Did you enjoy this story? Your support helps us continue producing new documentaries. A like, a comment, or a share makes all the difference. See more historical cases on our channel, and if you're not subscribed yet, join our community. I'll see you in the next episode.